as they want to. So we are starting. Good morning, Contemporary Issue Sunday School class. Thanks for being with us. And we are really pleased today to have Mark FELDMEIR with us to talk about all things church related and kind of bring us up to date and answer our questions. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today, taking time. And Lana Banbury's also here, our executive director of the church. So we might ask her questions too, if that's all right. So we will have a good discussion today. I want to also welcome first-time visitors, if we have any on today. It's entirely possible. We've got folks that. So welcome. I'm the class leader, Steve Baska, and we hope you will come back and visit us today. Before we get started, we like to do announcements also. Any announcements? First one is for a technical announcement. Mute yourself, please. In the lower left corner of your screen is the mute button. So please go down there and click it so there's a red line through your microphone so we don't hear background noise. And I can also mute you on my host controls too, and I will do that if anybody has excessive background noise. And as we talk today and ask Mark questions, speak up loud and be brief and be kind. That is our motto. Be kind and respectful. And if we veer off too much into debate and argument, I will do the muting also. But we don't have that happen very often, even though we talk about social issues. So I'm very proud of this class and we do a good job. Okay, other announcements. Susan Sutton, you had an announcement.
Yeah, so today is a very special day. It's my dad's 90th birthday and he's joining us on this call. So I just wanted to wish him a very happy birthday and tell him how much I love him. And hope that you'll all join me in wishing him a happy birthday as well.
Absolutely. Happy birthday, Joe.
Thank you.
Great. And I have an announcement too. It is my wife's birthday today also. You share it with Joe.
I do. Happy birthday, Joe.
Thank you.
Hey, but the sign announcing her birthday is going to kill your yard from lack of sunshine.
Our daughter hired a company that comes and puts like 4-foot tall signs in your yard that say happy birthday, and so the whole neighborhood knows it. It's pretty cute.
Yeah,
A happy 70th birthday, it says.
Barney, my dog, was barking proficiently this morning about 6 a.m. at your sign.
Doug is our next door neighbor. That's how he knows.
This is Karen Alexander. Although my dad's not with us on the call, he turns 91 tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so we're all going to celebrate with him from a distance.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, any other announcements? It's good to see the fires are declining a little bit. The cool weather and the rain is helping that, so that's a blessing. And wonderful service today. Not only great sermon by Mark, but wonderful to see the choir and all your faces and everybody singing together. It sounded so good, coordinated. Can't imagine how much work that is to get that many people coordinated.
Oh, yeah.
Great job.
Getting into Mark's.
Okay, we'll jump right in here. I'm going to introduce Mark and just give a little short biography also of Mark for those who may not know Mark's background. And then we're just going to have an informal discussion with Mark on some of the questions that I emailed out that you all have asked me before about our services, about social isolation, how the building is being used, staff and things like that. And also the wonderful big announcement this week that Mark gave about the donation that will almost entirely retire our debt for our building. That was a terrific, wonderful news.
Yes.
And if anybody missed it, there was a $3 million donation And we'll let Mark describe that also when we get to that section. So that was amazing. And we thank Mark for his work on that. Okay, Mark is our senior pastor of St. Andrew. He has been here 6 years and 2 months now, according to LinkedIn. It tracks those dates. Before that, Mark was the senior pastor at the San Dieguito United Methodist near San Diego for 8 years. And his Master of Divinity is from Claremont School of Theology, where he's also been a visiting professor and teaching homiletics, sermons. So it's no wonder to us that he is as good as he is at that portion of the job too. So with that, Mark, if you would unmute yourself and we will just talk with you, Mark. There you go, he's unmuted. Hope everybody can see Mark there in his square here on Hollywood Squares. And Mark, thanks for being with us. I know you are so busy, but we really appreciate you being with us. We got 52 screens on, so 60, 70 some people for our class. And I know everybody's missed seeing your smiling face in person live. So great to have you here. Let's jump in with, why don't you tell us first about that big news about the donation? How did that come about, and what's been the ramifications of that? What will that mean for us?
Yeah, well, we have for several years been working, I have been working with one particular member of St. Andrew who has had a great career and successful career, and had some assets that he had accumulated over the years, and it's been a relationship that has been a friendship over the last several years, and over the course of those about 5 years, we had pretty good conversations about how he'd want to be remembered, or at least what legacy he'd like to leave behind, and using some of his assets to advance the mission and vision of St. Andrew. He had always been somebody who contributed generously on an annual basis, but really wanted his bequest to really serve as a way to make the biggest difference. And so historically, he hadn't really participated in many campaigns, either stewardship or capital, knowing that his big contribution would be at the end of his life. And so, we had great conversations over the last several years about what would be the best way to use his bequest, and so he really felt that addressing the debt would be the first real obligation, and so our great benefactor died earlier this year, and that estate is sort of in the works of being settled, but most of it has been settled. There's just a small remainder remaining to be dealt with through the court system. But that gift was made in July, and right before I took vacation. And while I wanted to be able to share it with you before I left for vacation, I knew that I wouldn't have the opportunities to do so in ways that I could after vacation. So we held off on that. A couple of weeks ago, we met with our finance committee and proposed how we wanted to use that bequest. I mean, it was designated for capital and for indebtedness, and so, but in terms of deciding to take those funds which are already in our account now and actually make a payment toward our indebtedness before the end of August in order to knock out the vast majority of our indebtedness. And so I think on Friday, maybe Thursday, that initial $3 million payment or so roughly was made to First Bank to address our mortgage. And I think we have a balance between $300,000 and $400,000 on our current indebtedness. And so You know, when I came here in July of 2014, our indebtedness was, I think, 7.8 million, and we've gone through one complete 3-year campaign, and we're almost at the end of our second 3-year campaign, which will conclude in April of 2021. And so this was just the last gift to knock that indebtedness out. And we believe that with our outstanding pledges of roughly somewhere between $3 and $4 million, or $3 and $100 and $400,000, we can actually retire the debt entirely by May 1st of 2021, if not sooner, if folks advance their gifts between now and then.
That's incredible, Mark. And what will that enable us to do? Other things in the future and put less pressure on the church in different ways?
Yeah, well, first of all, already we've reduced by making the payment this last week, it reduced our monthly payment from roughly $62,000 a month to now roughly $39,000 a month. So we're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars just in interest payments alone. If that gift had not come through, we would have, we would have been paying for another. I think it was 2028 was the term of the loan. So number one, it'll enable us to save a great deal of interest payments, which will make it easier to retire our debt by May. The goal here now is to think about our mission and vision, and specifically our emerging vision around eradicating social isolation and disconnection by, as we say, practicing the faithful presence of the incarnate Christ. A couple of years ago, as you recall, we rolled out our vision around wellness and how do we begin to address some of the glaring needs in our community around disconnection, social isolation, reported levels of low well-being in the South Metro Denver area. And we looked at a few different initiatives that our vision team came up with. One is to establish a widespread, comprehensive small group ministry model at St. Andrew for our membership and constituency to be connected in small groups with others on a regular basis, a very intentional model that would hopefully lead into life groups, and trying to get all of our folks into life groups where we're supporting each other and praying for each other, caring for each other. We've got a lot of those groups going already, and even before the vision rolled out, I know several people on this call, in fact, are a part of covenant groups, which are really life-saving, life-giving ways to care for one another and to grow in faith. So those are already going, but we want to expand those to include other groups as well. And our second initiative was really to establish a very intentional wellness ministry. And by that we mean most likely a physical space, either on campus or somewhere in our community, which would be an intentional place for folks to go to care for one another, to build skills and practices for resiliency and community. And so we, just before the pandemic hit, we had done a lot of work around what age group in particular we wanted to focus on first, knowing that some of the trends in loneliness actually sort of invert what we typically understand to be the loneliest generation. There's that sort of that idea that there's, the angst of the youth, the anxiety of middle age, and the loneliness of old age is sort of the model that we've socially been trained in, that the older you get, the lonelier you get. What we're seeing across the board nationally is actually just the opposite. The most connected socially generation in America today is 65 and over. And of course, the loneliest by every standard and survey is what we today call the millennial generation. those, well, even younger than that, but right now it's basically ages 14 to roughly 28. That's the loneliest generation in America today. So as we did our visioning, we decided that really want to address, number one, that age group. Not that we would exclude any others, but we really want to invest heavily in building skills and practices for that generation to be socially connected, to care for one another, and to be well spiritually, emotionally, physically. So we identified ages 14 to 26 as our initial focus or target group. And it's sort of based on this idea that if we can get upstream, rather than dealing with crises downstream, if we can get upstream and teach younger kids and young adults how to be well, then maybe we'll avert crises down the road. So that's my long way of saying what this gift will bequest will enable us to do is to build a runway for a lot of that to happen going forward, to really fund the vision of wellness. And I'm super excited about that. The third initiative that we identified out of that visioning process as it relates to social isolation and disconnection is to think about another campus or satellite ministry that's apart from St. Andrew's physical campus that would target communities that are under-churched, as we might say, or under-reached in terms of our unique message of inclusive gospel love. And so we really originally were thinking that was going to be a physical place. We were looking at areas within a 7-mile radius of St. Andrew that we really wanted to target. The pandemic has gotten us to begin to think about expanding our vision around this satellite ministry or satellite campus and considering whether that might actually be a virtual campus. And we're seeing remarkable engagement in our ministry life, especially our worshiping community on Sunday mornings. Great engagement from folks that are outside of our community, geographically speaking, outside of our region. So we're connecting with folks all over the country and actually all over the globe who are watching and participating in our worship services on a regular basis. Not only are they participating, but they're giving financially. And so that's really sort of sparked an interest in us internally to have conversations about what does a virtual ministry look like? What does a virtual campus look like? Even post-pandemic, how can we reach people who are looking for the kind of message that's all about St. Andrew and that's quite rare in today's current church climate. So that's my long answer. I'm sorry.
That's okay, Mark. That's good. Before we leave the financial topic, just tell us briefly how St. Andrew's doing compared to last year pre-pandemic financially. It was giving and all church finances doing okay.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot going on to that answer, and I'll try to be brief, but what I'll say, number one, is this time last year, as of this past week, in terms of contributions, we were at 86% of contributions toward anticipated or budgeted contributions. 86% of budget in contributions. As of last week, we're actually at 96% of contributions to the annual budget. So we generally, and that 86 last, we do see a V in contributions in the summer, and it usually falls in that 82 to 86% range every year. So we kind of hold our breath going into summer, hoping that we have some momentum, but then we really push it hard coming out of summer. This year is a little bit different for a couple of reasons. One, a number of our pledging families this year, when the pandemic hit, gave the entirety of their pledge upfront. So we saw a number of families just write a check back in May and or even sooner to fund their entire pledge. So that's great on the one hand, but it does skew some of our numbers as we get into summer. So that 96% looks good, but we do know that folks that gave already may or may not give over and above what they pledged later in the year. So we'll see about that. I would say contributions is only a portion. It's the largest portion of our budget, but we do take in revenue and income from other sources, including the preschool. So I think as of now, this point in the year, we saw a decrease in what we projected for revenue from our preschool. That's been significant. And we had budgeted, I think, roughly 170,000 for 2020 as a contribution from our preschool ministry. And that's considerably lower than we anticipated. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of interpretation to where we are in terms of financially. I would say we're in great shape, much better than I would anticipate. Certainly that first week of shutdown in worship, I think we are all internally a little concerned about what that's going to look like. We have done a remarkable job of expanding our giving platforms online. So many folks have come online now and feel more comfortable giving financially online, and that's been good. And then we've seen some really good contributions come from non-pledging units that are outside of our immediate region. So a lot of different factors, and of course we did take in the PPP money from the CARES Act earlier this year. That helped also create a little bit of a softer landing.
And that was the government loan that churches could apply for, and that was about 400,000 that St. Andrew got to help roughly cushion for the 200,000 that the preschool was not earning. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Mark, I don't want to take up too much time here on financial. I know people have a lot of questions on services and staff, and so I want to let them ask questions. So let me open it up. If you got a question, just fire away or raise your hand. And if I don't hear from you, I will just jump in.
I'd like to ask about the schism in Methodism. What's happening on that front? Are the churches of like mind still coalescing? Just what is the current status?
It's a good question. I was joking earlier this week with some folks that, we've been in this heated debate for 50 years. Every 4 years, Methodists get together and we haven't been able to solve an issue. And it looks like the only thing that's really brought that debate to at least a healthy pause, it has been a deadly global pandemic. We've seen conversations across the board on this issue just pause, and there hasn't, to my knowledge, been much in terms of new developments around when that debate will resume. Of course, as you likely know, that there has been a plan for sort of an amicable separation that was to have taken place actually about right now in August and September of this year at a special general conference, but that was postponed due to the pandemic. It's a global conference. You can't have people from all over the country, all over the world coming for conferences. And so I misspoke actually. That was supposed to have happened back in May, but it was pushed until August, and the first week of September of 2021 is when that conference will happen. I anticipate that that plan is still mostly intact, and we'll expect a schism in the United Methodist Church that will result in United Methodism remaining the centrist and more progressive churches staying in the denomination and the more traditionalist churches leaving to form something new. I think that's still in play.
Okay, anybody else go ahead with questions?
I was going to ask about the Aquila. How's she doing? And, you know, in terms of what happened here, you know, what can we learn from that, and what can we do going forward as a church to be better citizens?
Let me give some context just for a minute before Mark does, in case any of our folks on today don't know. Reverend Aquila was an African-American pastor that came here from New York, experienced racism, not in our church, but in the community. And right as all of the issues started happening early this year, and ended up going back to New York because she did not feel comfortable. And it was quite a conversation in our church, including sermons about systemic racism in the society. So that's the background.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Aquila and her family have moved back to Manhattan, and they're settled in to their new apartment. And Aquila remains a member of the Mountain Sky annual conference. She continues in that process toward full ordination. She's a commissioned elder now, which is more of a probationary status, and is working toward ordination in the next year or two. Yeah, and I appreciate Steve's clarification on the issue. Aquila did, in her very brief time in Colorado, experience what she experienced and her family experienced as racism in a number of places in our broader community. She did not experience that at St. Andrew. It is, I think, unfortunate that those that may have read the Colorado Public Radio piece that was online interpreted her experiences as those that were relevant to St. Andrew's congregation. But unfortunately, it wasn't the case. And I will say that the CPR article was misleading in that way, and rather, in my interpretation, pretty poor journalism. A number of photos of her were taken on that article here on campus when, unfortunately, I think those photos should have been taken at the car dealership where she experienced racism, and at the school where her kids experienced that. Aquila did not live in Highlands Ranch, and so her kids, while they experienced racism in their school, that wasn't here at Highlands Ranch either. And I bring that up just because, as a result of that article, I did receive a number of really unhealthy, even hurtful emails from our broader Denver community who accused St. Andrew of racist, systemic racism, and that made it unsustainable for Aquila, when in fact that wasn't the case. So what do we learn? I think one great takeaway is that our entire staff over the last couple of months has really invested itself into reading and studying systemic racism. And we read a great book called White Fragility, which I highly recommend. I know many of you have read that. It's a good place to start in terms of having the hard conversations about systemic racism. Another great takeaway was, we spent 3 weeks in June leaning into hard conversations in a 3-part sermon series about racism. That was uncomfortable for a lot of folk, and I know that because I heard from people saying, I'm tuning out, I've had enough. And yet it's interesting that those 3 sermons, if you go back and look at YouTube, the viewership on those are some of our highest sermons of the year, not including Easter, which was well into the 4,000 views now. But people were engaged, and so I think it was a hard year. It was a hard year for Aquila. It was a hard year for all of us to listen to national and even regional conversations about race. And and know that one of our own staff members and clergy members experience much of what we see at the national level. So heavy conversations. And I'm grateful that Aquila was with us in ways that helped spark curiosity and a willingness and courage to go even deeper.
Any other questions on that topic? We could
This is
spend the whole
Terry.
hour on that topic, of course.
Dave, this is Terry.
Go ahead, Terry.
I'd like to know how the churches in our own conference are working with each other and trying to solve what their position is within our own conference and how things are going there.
Terry, is that relative to the conversation about race specifically?
Well, about discrimination, you know, the overall, if the national body is going to split up, our conference has a chance right now to try and work with the various churches within our own conference that may not be able to agree on some of these issues, but within our conference, it would give us an opportunity with all the churches in the conference to address these issues to make even our own conference in itself work better.
Yeah, you know, it's a great insight, Terry, and it's the work that we were trying to do actually this time last year with our task force at St. Andrew, as we really were discerning how we wanted to proceed as a congregation. Do we want to remain in a denomination that systemically has not only racism in it, but also gender or sexism issues? Look, there are many churches right now, United Methodist, in our very conference that are unsafe for women leaders and for people of color as pastors, and that knowledge creates this tension, even I think for all of us, certainly for me, that says this is part of our family tree that we're a part of, right? And yet there's not a lot of consensus in terms of real intentional efforts to dismantle some of the racist and sexist structures in our denomination. And the way we try to solve it as Methodists is often to appoint people of color or women or the folks who are from the LGBTQ family and community into positions of power, and we put those folks into sometimes hostile situations, and it doesn't go well for them, and it doesn't often move the ball down the field in terms of deeper conversations. So we've got a long way to go. I think one of the negatives of a church split that will likely happen next year is that I think the assumption will be that we solve the problem by getting rid of the traditionalists, so to speak. And now we don't have to deal with race. We don't have to deal with gender or homosexuality. We've got it resolved, when in fact, most of our churches, they don't want to leave the denomination and go with the traditionalists, but they also don't want to have these difficult conversations. So this is a lifelong effort. And I hope that's what I've been able to communicate in some of my preaching on this issue, as well as others, that we're just at the beginning, I think, of a major lifelong effort to deal with this.
Mark?
Wait, if I could add, this is Lana. The conference is doing what they're calling a pilgrimage to love, looking at racism. And you can see that on the conference website, the Mountain Sky website. I think it starts next week, the beginning of September.
Okay, Jim, go ahead, and then want to go to the topic of the building and when may we get back in the building and have in-person services, what criteria will help determine that. So I want to have plenty of time to ask about that. But Jim Vandermiller, go ahead.
Mark, thanks for your responses about the issues of racism and sexism. And I think all of us agree that it's been a tough couple years for our church and for the
Carolina's on.
Sorry?
Somebody was not muted, so I'll take care of that. Go ahead.
It's been a tough couple of years, and we've gotten a lot of bad press during that period of time, rightly or wrongly. I've been approached, and I'm sure an awful lot of other people have been approached and asked very specific questions about our church and about our stance on these things. And it's kind of uncomfortable to do this. Now, I know that this is not that they're not justified in doing this thing, but this is what is going on. And I was wondering if there has been any conversation going on in council or in other forums to be more proactive in addressing these issues. And let me use this as examples, not to say that we should copy other churches, but I do happen to know that one church is posted a large sign on the side of their building that says Black Lives Matter. And that there are other places that they are welcoming, that they are proactively welcoming people from the GLBTQ communities, that they are reaching out and doing so openly and notoriously, so that the community is aware that we are not sitting on our hands, that we are moving forward on this thing. So has there been any conversations along these lines?
Well, let me say, let me say how I sort of understand movements toward inclusion and justice. I'm all for signs and I'm all for statements, and I think we could have conversations about what those look like. I'm the kind of leader that would prefer to model what inclusion looks like, and I've been extremely intentional in my time here at St. Andrew in doing that. You know, we don't talk about the sexual orientation of our staff, but we have a diverse staff that represents, I think, well, the LGBT community, and not just clergy staff, which sets us apart in our United Methodist denomination, to have two people on our staff who we can speak of in terms of same gender or marriages, in fact. So I think that's really important to me, and having Aquila here was important to me. That wasn't tokenism by any means. It was a willingness to start having hard conversations, and that came with the assumption and really a great deal of conversation with Aquila before she came. In fact, before we even chose to bring her here, that she was up for that. And so I'll just say that that's really important, that we model it rather than simply create statements or signs. We have, as a part of the Future Strategy Task Force work, we did produce, I think, a statement that I'm very proud of, and it's on our website, almost front and center, around inclusion of all people, not just LGBTQ, but people of color, women in ministry, those that are differently abled. And that's, again, not a statement so much as it is an aspiration to live deeper into that as a congregation. I don't know if, Jim, if I answered your question, but and I'm happy to engage it more if I don't know if I really heard beyond that what can be helpful, but I love the conversation, so feel free.
Well, my only concern is, and I don't disagree with you, that walking the walk is probably an awful lot more important than talking the talk. But talking the talk is important, in my opinion. and talking the talk in a manner that is both appropriate but loud enough for people to hear. And my concern is that we are walking the walk, and that we are, but we're playing, fighting a defensive action rather than a proactive action, and proactivity not only to protect our and enhance our own community, but to enhance the issue itself. That when the United Methodist Church and when the large church of St. Andrew is openly advocating, I think that it lends strength to those people who are suffering and who are indeed on the front lines of this whole issue, and
Jim, I think
in many ways bleeding.
Jim, we need to move on to the next topic. And I think you do bring up a recurrent question: how aggressive should we be in promoting Black lives and LGBT issues? But please forgive me for interrupting, but we do need to move on and ask. I know a lot of people want to know from Mark and Lana, what's the criteria for when in-person services will start again? Is it going to be vaccine? Are we waiting for a vaccine for our congregation to get comfortable? Is it going to be next spring sometime before we're back in the building for services? And what will they look like?
Let me start, and then I'll have Lana give more detail, because Lana has been awesome in terms of really being on top of conversations with local, regional, and even statewide protocol. I will say not a day goes by that I don't hear from somebody asking, when are we going to get back together for in-person worship, and why can I go to restaurants and eat, and why can my kids go to school and study, but we can't come to church? And it's a growing concern, and I feel that there's some growing momentum toward finding creative ways to get together that still are safe. What we're finding is that the broad reach that we're achieving with our online services, it's quite remarkable, and we're reaching far more people today than we were 6-7 months ago. We were averaging roughly 1,100 in worship before the pandemic hit, and if you look at those numbers now on viewership, you know, we look at it at a 24-hour period and say that's kind of the period in which our attendance should be measured, and we're well beyond those numbers. If you do a factor of like 1.7, you know, if you multiply each view by 1.7, which roughly I think reflects a 2-person household. I mean, we're you know, consistently pushing anywhere from 15 to 2,500 people a week. So what we want to make sure that we do is not create opportunities that then lead to any outbreak, which then requires us to shut down our facility and then not be able to do the kind of presentation that we're doing for Sunday morning. Does that make sense? We're trying to balance how to use our facility in ways that are safe, that don't lead to a shutdown in the event that there's an outbreak. And so I'll lift that up. I don't know if you saw, but on Friday in your e-news, there's a survey. It's a very simple survey, just a few questions for you to fill out that will help us know where folks are in their own sort of appetite for regathering. So please fill that out, and that's going to help determine some next steps. Lana, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, so one of the riskiest things we can do is to mix the generations the way that we enjoy worship. That's high up there with hanging out at a bar in terms of most likely to cause to spread the disease. So we're really weighing the quality of our online service versus what we could offer safely inside. And who would it be safe for? Inside, we're limited to 175 people. So the Douglas County has a variance on the state orders, and the state limits it to 50. But in Douglas County, we can go up to 175 or half of the capacity of the sanctuary, whichever is smaller. So that'd be 175 people. The choir is more than 100 people. So that gives you a sense of how few people would be in our sanctuary. And we couldn't sing. Like, I mean, we couldn't have the choir singing like you heard today virtually. So it wouldn't be what we all love about worshiping together at St. Andrew. So that's a big consideration. And I think a vaccine is what gets us all back in the building together. Now outside is, everyone agrees that outside is better than inside in terms of safer, and they still have restrictions. So outside, again, you're limited to half the capacity of the space. So however that's kind of being defined, people still have to social distance or physical distance and wear masks, but limited to 250 people outside maximum, or half the capacity, whichever smaller. So we did invest in a radio transmitter, and we are planning an event on Sunday, September 13th, that will celebrate Mark's book, which is out on the 8th. We actually have them in-house right now, but he'll sign books, and we'll have the grill team out, and we'll have kind of a party atmosphere. So the survey, though, that Mark was talking about is looking at how do we start having sacred gatherings, some sort of spiritual, meaningful time together in person, outside, starting next month. So we surveyed you to see how many people are interested in doing that and what time during the week would be best received. And we're gonna plan based on the responses. But we're missing being together just like you all are. And really the building is some staff, they're recording in the sanctuary, as you see every Sunday. And we've been very intentional with the preschool open now, that any outbreak that happens in the preschool, and of course the risk goes up exponentially, will stay in the preschool, that we won't be impacted in the rest of the building. So we share a workroom, and we've been very intentional about the times that the preschool staff will be using the workroom, and then it gets cleaned and they use it alone, that kind of thing. And so the rest of our staff is protected. So it's all about when I have to get on the phone with Tri-County Health and explain that we have an outbreak, but that the rest of the building wasn't contaminated. And an outbreak is two people from different family units at the same time. So one student or one teacher is not an outbreak. And they're working very hard in the preschool to keep the classrooms separate from each other, and they're cleaning all the time. And they already had a lot of cleaning protocols in place to run a healthy preschool. And Laura and Felicity worked all summer to make sure that they could open the preschool safely. And so far it's been great.
Great. Thank you, Lana. It's 11:21. We got about 9 minutes left. If Mark and Lana can stay with us to 11:30. And I want to let other folks ask questions on the services and the buildings they have. I know you do have questions. Go ahead.
This is Bob. As it relates to the services, Mark, you've mentioned it, the viewership has gone up, and I think that's really awesome. But I do reflect on it, and the services are different online, right? They have to be, potentially. What are your thoughts, and how will you manipulate, how much of it do you think you're increasing viewership because it's changed, it's morphed, and not that we shouldn't go back to the other way, but how do you foresee the services? Will they be the same? Will they, you know what I mean? When we go back to church and we all attend it at some point, how will the service change?
Great. Great question, Bob. I think the way they have changed and the ways we have intentionally changed our morning services is number one, more of an outward focus that understands that our viewership is not local primarily. While I should say a majority of our folks are local, what we're seeing is a broader reach geographically, nationally in particular, which I think is really where our future needs to continue to be. Even when we get back into in-person worship, we have to do our live streaming in such a way that those that aren't a part of our community can still find connection with us. So maybe just thinking just about how we some of our word choices that are they more outwardly focused or more inwardly focused on our own private community. So there's some of that we're talking about. We're trying to eliminate unintentional dead time in our services. We've got a lot of that on a Sunday morning in person, people walking from place to place, moving from the floor to the podium, that kind of thing that we expect in an in-person service, but on camera, as we know, dead time impacts one's attention span. So what I'm hearing, and some good feedback from some folks on this call actually, about how can we be more intentional about silent time or reflective time that is on screen that allows us to reflect on the sermon or the prayer or whatever. So we're working on that. But again, primarily we're asking questions about when this is all over, how are we positioning ourselves now to try to capture a broader market outside of our region with such an important gospel that St. Andrew is known for, and that is so absent on the national level. So we want to take more of that market, so to speak, to use crass language. But I hope that's helpful. And every week we are processing together on Monday morning. What do we do right? What can we do better? What are we hearing from people about what they want, and making improvements? So I know Jim has a question. Jim Watson.
Yes, this is not of great import, but I think a lot of people may wonder, like I do, how do you determine whether you wear wet vestments in the Sunday service?
Yeah, we were looking when the pandemic hit about what seems to be most appropriate for a given Sunday. And so like Palm Sunday, Easter Sunday, the season of Lent, for the most part, we're robing up. Now it just feels a little bit less urgent to wear a robe when everybody else is wearing their pajamas in their couches. So we're open to that, but we also are trying to be mindful of the fact that we want to be accessible to a viewership that maybe hasn't previously related to us. And yeah, so it's a great question.
Thank you.
And it's been so hot that wearing a robe to record a sermon can be sort of oppressive. But I know Shirley's been patiently waiting. Shirley Davis.
I was wondering about the book study groups. When can we meet together?
Yeah, Lana, do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this group, there's 56 people on this call. So that's a large group. That makes it hard to meet together. So even if we met in Fellowship Hall, which I think capacity-wise we could make happen, it'd be hard to hear each other with masks on. So again, I think the quality of the experience is better on Zoom for the moment, because with a sound, when we pass the sound system around, that's not healthy. So there's just a lot of things to take into account. Smaller groups could be meeting at church, but they could also be meeting, right now they're meeting outside, many of the covenant groups are. They could be meeting in parks or backyards or people's homes. So we are looking at that. We are starting with the youth. The youth are meeting outside starting today, doing their Sunday school class and their confirmation classes. And when the weather turns, they will move inside. We've already figured out how to make that happen, including the parents for the confirmation classes. They'll be inside in fellowship hall when they need to be. So we are starting there, and we are going to do the grief group that Rhonda does for the kids, a modified version of that also this fall.
We're about out of time, 11:27. Let's take a last question or two.
This is Terry. I have one quick question. My church and religious background has always been that I'm a disciple of Christ. And what was early, it's one thing to have your staff set the model, in which in the last 20 some years of this church, we have done it. We just haven't made it verbally as obvious, but the staff has always been that way. We need better tools to become better disciples of this church. And I think that was what Jim was trying to get at earlier.
I just would like to share something with you. I was telling some friends the other day about the miracle that's happened in our church for us to be able to become totally debt-free, hopefully by May. And I can remember back probably 35, 40 years ago when I was a part of a small church back in Kansas City, and I attended my first burning of the mortgage. And it was on the front stage of this little bitty Pentecostal church. And I know the district people came, and they had a cauldron that they put the papers down in and lit. And the significance of that moment and that experience was pretty amazing to me. And to think that I'm going to be able to experience that again in my lifetime, only for a much bigger vital congregation, is pretty exciting to me. So I'm just really thankful to God, the way he moves in people to create those things that happen in our lives. And I think it'll be a really, really exciting event for our church.
Thank you.
Just something to look forward to.
Grateful.
I want to give Mark a chance to answer Terry's question about discipleship if you want to, and then I'll finish up. We've got to let Mark go.
Yeah, Terry, I think at the end of the day, that's a big part of our vision and mission is what does discipleship look like in the 21st century, and in this particular area of Denver. And we I think we're committed to this vision of discipleship that is formed in community, not apart from one another, not in isolation, but and discipleship is not simply about learning information. It's about experiencing transformation. It doesn't exclude information, but it goes this next step of we are together being transformed by the grace of God through what Wesley called the ordinances of the spiritual life: prayer, Bible study, support groups, the sacraments, worship. All of these things are discipleship. And so it's not just a program or even a resource, it's a way of life that everything we do in the church should be to that end. And what does a disciple look like today in a world in which some lives don't seem to matter, in which people experience terrible injustices every day? And so I think that's where we're at. It's not just a spiritual thing, it's a profoundly social obligation. How do we change our world? That's part of discipleship as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. And that reminds me to tell the class that Rev Jerry Butler, our new pastor of discipleship, is going to be our guest and talk about discipleship and his vision for it in September here. So please join us for that. And Mark has a new book out very shortly. And he's going to be, we have his class in September also on Zoom about the House Divided book that will be important too. So, and also Rev Jerry has a class on the 5 practices of the Christian life in September. I will mail those out to the class this afternoon, more details, how you can sign up for that. Mark, thank you, and Lana for your time this morning. We appreciate it. So much information shared, and blessings to you both. And I just want to pray, Lord, thank you for all that you give us with our church and with our staff, and please be with us all in this coming year. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. We look forward to doing this again. We'd love to do this maybe every 4 to 6 weeks. So if you want to look at your calendar, and we'll look at late September, early October. We'll jump on another call.
Wonderful.
This has been really good to hear where you all are and to see your awesome faces. Thanks for your support, for your love for my whole team here, and for the ways that you care for us and care for the ministry of the church. I am profoundly grateful.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Blessings.
Bye-bye.